Hey guys, today I'm here with Christine Davies. You're the chaplaincy, you run the hospital chaplaincy department at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital. That must be a really extreme job. I know I've seen a couple of things that you've done as well. Many people don't. Okay, are you familiar with who Duncan Trussell? I was like, it sounds like a mushroom. Duncan Trussell. And that kind of exactly tells you what kind of stuff he does too. But he has a podcast and he had his mother on
Hmm.
as a guest 2 weeks before she died.
Hmm.
And she was some kind of psychologist or psychiatrist or something. And they knew that she was dying. And she did 2 weeks later from some sort of cancer. But that episode really stuck with me. And I think about it all the time because the whole episode was about death and how, as a
Hmm.
society and culture, we spend all of our time avoiding it and pretending it doesn't exist and sugarcoating it and glazing over it. And um, also, Alan Watts was
Hmm.
telling a story or something in one of his things I was listening to about how you can be on your deathbed in the hospital. There's nothing they can do. They've told everybody that you only have like 48 hours to live or whatever, whatever. And your friends and family will still come in there and tell you, oh, you're going to be okay. You're going to get out here and we're going to
Yes,
go home and
yes,
have a
there is so
picnic
much
with
denial.
tacos.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't help anything for
Mm-hmm.
anybody. They mean well. And then
Mm-hmm.
also still Alan Watts was talking about how a well-versed preacher though can come in there and make you feel really good about dying. Like, man, you're getting out. You're done. Like you don't have to worry about bills anymore. You don't have to worry about pain
Mm-hmm.
and emotions. Ew, emotions. Uh, so yeah, that's pretty much what you're doing, right?
Yeah, there and I love those two examples that you shared, and I'll have to check them out. Yeah, so I sit with a lot of people who are at end of life, and I do a lot of training for individuals who are becoming hospital chaplains because it is a whole field, right? It's not just someone walking off the street doing this work. It's people that have a theological degree, often an ordination or endorsement from a particular faith background, as well as 1,600 hours of postgraduate clinical training. So they're doing internships and residencies in this work to learn how to be with people because, as you said, it is hard. We want to cheer people up sometimes. We are well meaning, but we can actually do a lot of damage
Mhm.
with our words, like those individuals that you talked about that are in denial, right? Trying to cheer people up, trying to we talk a lot in our society now about toxic positivity, and there's some toxic spirituality as well, and people putting their own theology and their own kind of cheerfulness onto other people who are in pain, and not just at end of life, but at various types of pain, and in so doing can silence them and not allow them to do the work that needs to be done in order to heal and to process, or at end of life to be able to have that acceptance, to be able to say the things that they need to say to their family in order to have what we sometimes refer to as a good death. Right, where people feel like they were able to um, speak their truth. We have an intervention that we call life review, looking back on one's life, having that reflection, recognizing, what was important, so that they can die well. Yeah, so it is an intense job. I enjoy it because it is a way to be with people when they are at their most vulnerable, whether it's the patients themselves or the families, to make it even 1% better by bearing witness to what they're going through, by being there, providing that listening presence. And a lot of times it's by doing less or saying less that we can actually be more effective, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive, if you will. But and my interns are always surprised when they've been with a family saying goodbye to their loved one at end of life, And the family afterwards thanks them and says, "Oh, you made that so much easier. I appreciate you being here." And my intern always comes back to me and says, "I didn't do anything." I said, "No, you did. Your presence, you were there as this family was saying goodbye. You helped them to have these really meaningful conversations and guided them through this process, because this is not what people go through every day, right? I'm used to going through it every day with other families, but they don't know what to do oftentimes. So if we can help individuals and help families to incorporate all of the elements that they may want to incorporate at the end of their lives or at any point of suffering, the bulk of what I do is around bereavement, but really when anyone's in pain for any reason.
Yeah, it translates across all factors of life, not just death.
Mhm.
When we focus on uh, I like focusing on the death part just because so many people refuse to. They don't want to look at it, and which means that we all need to look at it more and to be able to grieve, quote unquote, better. Because some of us are taken so off guard by this, even when we know it's coming. Like,
Mhm.
my grandfather died in 2021. He had a strange sort of dementia for years and years and years that escalated into seizures, and ultimately that's what took him. We
Mm.
knew for 5 years probably
Mm.
that we were on our last leg with him. And it was probably longer than that. It was probably closer to 10 or 15 years that we started getting.
Mm.
He was like, he had another seizure and ended up having to be med flighted because he would when he had these seizures he would fall, and he was already in like his 70s. So when he fell, he would break ribs or
Mm.
hit his head on something, or it would just
Mhm.
exasperate
Oh,
it. So we would get call after
so
call
hard.
for years of they were mid-flighting him again, and it was always the same story. We don't know if this is the end or not.
Mm.
So we kind of
Oh,
desynthesize to it a little
yeah,
bit.
that's a hard place to be because, and unfortunately, I hear that story often because you're having to be hyper vigilant for so long and you're kind of waiting with bated breath. And there's a great term for what you were going through, with your grandfather, which is anticipatory grief.
Yeah.
Right? So you knew that the end was coming, and it was, kind of a lot of losses along the way, right? Especially anyone with dementia, or any sort of chronic condition that is going to impact their functioning.
Hmm.
You're losing, sometimes people talk about it as losing pieces
Yeah.
of the individual, or the loss before the loss is another term that individuals use to really process with it. And a lot of the families that I journey with talk about having some relief when their loved one does die, and they feel guilt around that, and they're surprised by it. They're surprised that they feel relief, but I think it's pretty natural
Mhm.
given that you have been preparing for this for so long, and that you saw your loved one potentially in pain or not themselves. And so there can be, I think, a way of settling into what you've been living with for a while. But I do like to remind folks of that, not to have guilt around it, because grief can come with so many different emotions. And I've also had family members talk to me about, almost wishing that their loved one would die sooner because they are seeing so much of the pain that they're in, and that death would be a comfort to them to have that. So it is complex, and as you said before, as a society, we are terrible at talking about death, and that's one of the reasons I like to talk about it more, because I think we can normalize it from a societal perspective. And some of it is about, I think, our particular culture. So there's stories of, a professor in an Eastern culture who says to a classroom of students, "What is the opposite of death, and they all say life. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they say life in the Western culture. Sorry, I messed it up. In the Western, they say life. In the Eastern, when you ask what is the opposite of death, they say birth, right? Because they understand that to be a life cycle. And we've also done this strange thing where we have technologized death quite a bit. So if you think about what our ancestors went through, you know, even 100 years ago, maybe 100 years before that, death was very much in the home. It was part of life. We also had a much lower expectation for life expectancy, but people were used to it. And now, a lot of deaths occur, in the hospitals, and in a way, in a cleaned up version. Or you think of, funerals. It's very separate. And I think there's pluses and minuses to that, but we're not used to seeing it as much. And I think that is the hard thing for individuals, especially when I'm prepping a family to go into their loved one's room. When we know that the loved one is about to die, they don't know, what to expect, or what to look for, or what it's going to be like. Or sometimes they don't want to see their loved one. If I am accompanying a family after they've died, and having to take them to the morgue, it's too hard, for them to see. And so we tell people there's no right or wrong way to do it. But I think it does speak to the larger comfort level. And like you, I talk about it all the time. I'm no fun at like dinner parties. I don't know if you saw the Barbie movie, but I loved the scene where, they're in a dance party, and all of a sudden you hear a record screech, and she goes, "Do you guys ever think about dying?" I'm like, "Oh yes." Barbie could be a hospital chaplain, because we talk about that a lot. And it came up, I think, significantly during COVID, as people were, fearful for their own death, as they were, hearing about all the deaths going on, having family members impacted by that. So I think we got a little bit more consciousness raising when it came to that. Also, things like doing advanced care planning is so important. So, and we just passed, just the other day was National Healthcare Decisions Day, which is always the day after tax day. So it's always April 16th, which I love, because it's an ode to Benjamin Franklin, saying you can escape death and taxes. Those are the only two certain things in our life. And so it's right after tax day. But the idea is, telling your loved ones what your wishes are if and when you can no longer speak for yourself, from a medical perspective. So things like, would you want, CPR done if you have, a terminal disease? Would you want to be intubated? Would you want to be in the hospital when you die? Would you rather be at home? What do you want your family to know? And naming the person who is going to make those decisions for you is so important, because otherwise it's going to default to a legal next of kin. And for some people, that is not who they would necessarily have chosen. And I have seen lots of families really be in distress because they don't know what their family member would have wanted done. And they feel all that additional burden of guilt, and in the midst of their grief, right? They don't need that on top of it. So that is my plea to people, to think about these things and to fill out that documentation. It's pretty easy to do. You don't even need a lawyer, although you can go and see a lawyer to do it. But I think the reason that we put it off is because it involves us thinking about our own mortality, and who apart from, you and I really want to think about that. But yeah, there's a large majority of they've done surveys, a large majority of individuals say, oh yes, advanced care planning is important. And I would like, to be able to make those decisions in advance, but only about 30% actually have done the work of it. So I do recommend to your listeners to think about that. And there are great online tools. I just wrote a newsletter actually about it. So you can go to my newsletter and read a little bit more. And I have links there to different documents that I recommend people fill out for themselves and to have those conversations with others. And yeah, so I like to be like with Oprah with advanced directives and advanced care planning. Anytime I go anywhere, I'm like, okay, you get one, you get one, you get one. We have to fill these out now, and I view it as a future gift to your family. That's something that you can do today, so that you're going to cause them less distress later on.
Yeah, and hopefully less fighting because
Oh my
fighting.
goodness. I have sat in so many family meetings where, I feel almost like a referee.
Yeah.
Especially I see it a lot when a parent is dying and their spouse maybe has already died or is, no longer their spouse. And there's two or three or four children and they don't all agree. And it can cause such significant harm, and it's at a time where emotions are heightened to begin with, right? So all of our worst selves come out when we are going through something stressful,
Mhm.
and saying goodbye to a loved one is stressful, and to add on to that, can create really long-lasting wounds amongst your family. And I don't think anyone would want that if they really thought about it. Like, oh, yes, I would like my death to, bring about long-lasting rifts, right? No, of course not. We are hoping that the legacy that we leave is one of love and this family that we may have created, or even friends. Like it can be any different constellation of whoever, is within your orbit and who are your people.
Yeah, because again, it doesn't matter if you have warning, because uh, so many of us stick our head in the sand to where, going back to my grandfather, we
Mm-hmm.
15 years that this was,
Yeah.
and not to mention that, just by default, we're all going to land there anyway, eventually. So we should
Mm-hmm.
um, go ahead and kind of try to accept that and look at that, but next to nobody does, you're right. And so 15 years led up to this, and we still had people who were like family members who were part of the process of caring for him every single day of this time,
Mm-hmm.
were just, I guess, in denial or something, and
Yeah.
completely shocked when he actually
Well,
died.
when he did die. Well, and that's the other piece of it too. I think the burden of caregiving
Mm,
is significant
yes.
and the toll that that can take. So it's almost to me, yeah, I hear, your story and it may not be that surprising because they're just so, I've done it too when I've cared for people. You're so focused on the day to day, right? Because there are so many tasks and the emotional load of it all can be all consuming. And so that's another reason that I recommend to caregivers. I know it's difficult, but I recommend to caregivers to take care of themselves as well because and women are especially good at this, putting other people's needs before their own. And there's been research on this, and I've seen it borne out, unfortunately. Um, when individuals have a chronic condition that is requiring a lot of care, sometimes the caregiver winds up dying first
Hmm.
because they have put off their own, routine medical examinations or other aspects of their own health. And that can be tragic in its own way. And I think it would be a surprise to most people to hear that.
Yes, the statistics are out there that primary caregivers often, it's like 10 or 15 years knocked off their lifespan, something like
Mhm.
that. I
Yeah, I
read
don't,
a couple of
yeah,
days ago.
it is significant. And something to keep in mind, if any of your listeners find yourselves as a caregiver right now, yes, do your documentation for what you want at the end of your life, but also take care of yourself now.
Hmm.
And that's, something else that comes up for me doing the work that I do. We are not promised any moment. And so really um, having that in the background to motivate us to live the ways in which we want to live today. And I understand that can be really difficult when you have people that you are caring for. But if there are ways in which you can infuse your life with meaning and sacredness in those moments, that is so important.
Yeah, facing death gives you the opportunity to take every moment as a complete gift. And I
Hmm.
come off sometimes as really callous because I'm a little overly practical at times.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, yeah, I definitely manage that aspect of me with just active listening and no talking because
Oh, and we could talk about that as well, because that's something else I teach about. How do you listen better?
yeah, because a lot of times all you have to do, oh, again, coming back to like how it
Yeah.
expands not just with death, but in all areas of
Hmm.
turmoil and stress and situations and circumstances that are tragic and whatnot. I, People are always like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say.
Hmm.
Literally
Yes.
just exist in the space, hold
Hmm.
space,
Hmm.
watch the person who is, having the hard time, gauge what, the only thing you really need to do or say is, do you need a drink of water? Are you
Hmm.
hungry? Can I get you some
Hmm.
food? Would a nap help? I can take care of all of this while you rest a minute. Like, just
Hmm.
holding space for the person to also be cared for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a little bit of what we talked about before, I could give you a whole list of things of what not to say,
Yeah.
right? Because I've heard people say those things that are well-meaning, such as, oh, everything happens for a reason, or, oh, this is just a test, or you'll get through this, or just think positively, whatever it is, those can do harm.
Mm-hmm.
So we are better off, as you said, being present in the moment. I had a seminary professor who would say, in crisis, when you are providing care for someone, you show up and you shut up.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that because it is um, a way of reassuring people that nothing you say is going to make the situation better, but there's plenty that you can say that might make the situation worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the first step of caring for others in that way is recognizing what's going on for us, because oftentimes it is our own desire to cheer the other person up or to fix the situation. It's really about our own motivations and our own inability
The
to
ego.
sit in that pain, right? And there's a great anonymous quote that says, the cry of the soul can only be heard by one whose soul has already cried. And how I interpret that in my work is oftentimes people who have gone through their own pain, whether it's grief due to a loss or anything else that's gone on that's been hard in someone's life, they often can sit with individuals better because they know what it is to be told, oh, just get over it, or, these types of things that can be harmful. And it's actually our pain that can equip us to be with others, even if we've not been with someone in that exact same experience, right? We can tap into, okay, what was it like for me when I was going through that? What did I need? Right. And then offering that rather than, some of the empty phrases. Something else I like to recommend to people, if you're offering, care to a friend or a family member trying to help, right? I think all of us are well intentioned and have, good hearts, and that's what's motivating a lot of us. I recommend not asking, oh, let me know if you need anything, because then that puts the onus back on that person.
Mm-hmm.
So I will do something as simple, or recommend people do something as simple as sending a text saying, okay, I'm at the grocery store right now. I'm going to bring you, dinner for next week. Would you like me to drop it off at your door today or tomorrow? Right? Like giving people choices, but within a framework.
Yes.
Or I can walk your dog for you. I can babysit your kids. I can do your laundry. Which one? one, two, or three, or all of the above.
Mhm.
Really minimizing the choices that people have to make or the stress of them being the ones to ask for things when we know it is hard to ask for what we need. And sometimes it's hard to even figure out what it is that we need in any moment. Um, and it could be as simple also as, I'm just going to show up and sit next to you, and we don't have to talk about anything, right? We can talk about it if you want, but otherwise I'm just going to be here because I know that this is hard for you to go through. So I think giving people options like that, real tangible, practical things like you talked about before, like here's some water, right? Helping people to take care of, their basic needs when we look at the Maslow hierarchy, right? Like we're focusing on, the ones below, can go much further than us trying to put our own beliefs on someone in that particular moment or trying to fix it when there is no fixing it.
Mhm. Yeah, you can't really ease the pain. You just have to let it run its
Mhm.
course, the 5 stages of grief and whatnot. And for sure, you can't put your own ideologies on them because most of the time, we don't really know what other people think or believe in. So
Mhm.
then you're putting them in an awkward position if they don't believe the way you do. And they most likely recognize that you're meaning well, but they're probably feeling very frustrated with you and like you're wasting their time when they're busy over here grieving.
Mhm.
So you need to, yeah, no talking and just let them tell you, let them guide you, let them lead,
Mhm.
and you just hold the space.
Yeah,
I
meet people where they are.
also agree that we've modernized death too much to where
Mm.
we're disconnected from it. Used to, it happened, you're right, all in the house, and the family took care
Mhm.
of everything. And um, I've seen some things. I don't know if I read an article or if I had a guest on, actually. The information kind of starts running together.
Mm.
But somebody was talking about how you still do have the option of caring for your loved one in the home, preparing their body yourself if you want to. I know a lot of people don't know where to begin with that, but you don't have to call the morgue immediately. You don't have to rush into anything. And those who slow everything down and just take the time, who choose to have all this happen in the home, report more connection to their loved ones and
Mhm.
more ease with the grief
Mhm.
process because it's more natural. And so, you can be the hospital is a very rigid place to be just
Mhm.
by nature. So,
Yeah.
white coat syndrome, whether or not we're the patient, most of us are stressed out in those types of settings just naturally. So, if you're adding that extra stress on something that's already stressful, again, this isn't for everyone. If you're like, absolutely not, somebody else take, then that's totally okay as well. Whatever works for you is what you should do.
Mhm.
But many people do report an easier time with the whole death and grief process when they're involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, many people do not want to die in a hospital if you were to ask people, right? And there have been studies that have done that. And hospice is a beautiful thing that can help a lot of people to get to be able to die at home. And it's the type of thing where people have to, unfortunately, what I've seen is they're called in too late, where it's not a possibility, right? And so sometimes that's because the family isn't willing to have some of those conversations sooner rather than later, the patient themselves. And so that's where going back to the advanced care planning can really help to state, what are your wishes are so that everyone knows from, uh, very beginning stages of someone's end of life that this is the plan, this is the goal, or we talk about goals of care a lot, and what is it that someone would want. Now my preface for all of this is, this is when we know that death is coming, and just also noting that there's also a lot of what I would say is traumatic or crisis death, right, where we don't know. unfortunately, like the car accidents, the falls, the heart attacks that come out of nowhere. And those are also very, very difficult for families to navigate. Uh, and a lot of what my job is as a chaplain is to be there in those gaps with the family, and it's a much different type of grief, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because they haven't had the time to sit with it for even a day or two before it happens, and they haven't had the opportunity to say goodbye,
Mhm.
and so the crisis grief can often be harder to I think just harder to work with moving forward from the death. And in those instances, I hear a lot of families replaying, kind of everything that happened, trying to see like, oh, could I have, if only I told him not to go to the store to get milk, and then he wouldn't have been in the car accident. And it's a real um, difficult place for people to be and to make meaning of in that moment. And the other piece that I see a lot of is it doesn't feel real for
Mhm.
folks. So every time I'm with situations, I often hear families say, "This just feels like a bad dream,"
Mhm.
right? Because it is just so shocking
Mhm.
and completely out of the blue for a lot of people.
Yeah, and the edges of reality do become very fuzzy
Hmm.
these days. I've experienced both, and I've often sat around and thought about, which form of loss would I prefer? The
Oh,
slow
yeah.
and the
Hmm.
slow
Hmm.
decay, or the instant shock,
Yeah.
and they're both their own different things.
Yeah, it's all hard in
Mhm.
different ways. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, trying to lighten it up a little bit, uh, you have to know the darkness in
Mm,
order to really appreciate the light and be able to live day to day. And facing the darkness of all of this has helped me really chill out about a lot of things in life.
mm,
It used
mm-hmm,
to be everything was stressful for me. I've built my entire
mm,
platform on anxiety, and
hmm.
solely. And so I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
But coming to terms with all of this has really uh made things less stressful. For example, the kids color on the walls. My husband loses his crap. And I'm like, look, it's all gonna burn down eventually anyway. And that's my attitude towards everything these days. Does it really matter? Does it really matter? I mean,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
probably not. Most likely not. And if you really have this attitude moving forward in life, you have not only the courage to do new things and try new things and, go out on a limb and whatever, whatever. Take that random trip to Europe. I don't know what it is about Americans, but we feel like it's super crazy dangerous to go visit another country. And so um which is relative to the country for sure. But if you live with the mindset of we are never promised tomorrow, we
mm-hmm,
only have this moment right now. Who do we
mm-hmm,
want to be in this moment right now? You start noticing all of the pettiness that most
mm-hmm,
people absorb themselves with. And it's like, wow, we only have X amount of time in this life on this planet. Is that being mad about that? Is that really how you want to spend your limited amount of time?
mm-hmm. Yeah, it puts things in perspective
Uh-huh.
in and can be very clarifying.
Hmm.
Although I might be with your husband, I would maybe get upset about the crayon on the wall. But there's plenty of other things where it's like, okay, what matters, right? And what is it that we're gonna want to remember? There was a great cartoon that I saw once where it was just a cartoon of someone in a hospital bed, and there was a family member there, someone in a clerical collar, I'm guessing a priest that was there, and the patient in the bed says, I only regret not spending more time on the internet. And I'm like, to me, that was funny because that's not what anyone, is talking about, and how much of our lives, you know, uh, are really focused on making the most of it and taking the vacations, doing things that are bringing you joy. And a concept that I sometimes engage in, because I see so much of, the heavy pieces that we're talking about, is called doubling the joy. Like, how do I add even more joy into my life to counterbalance, a lot of the sorrow that I sit with? But in so doing, it's also, emphasizing living one's life and doing things that are going to connect with yourself, with others, with the world around you. And so, absolutely, I think that is, if there's no other takeaway, I hope that people can live with intention. And not putting things off, and not saying, oh, it'll be better next week, or in I'll do that, next year, or when at this season, oh, work's busy right now, I can't do this. No, like, if not now, when?
Mhm.
There's a great book, I'm forgetting the title of it right now, but it's and the author, the title is Time Management for Mortals, and I think it's something like, I'll have to look it up real quick. I think it's something about, we only have so many weeks, right? And it gives us the number, which I'm not good with numbers. I think it was 48 or 52,000, 4,800 weeks, or, something like that. And it's really breaking it down like, okay, how do you want to spend your life? And how you spend your days is really how you spend your lives. People much smarter than I have said that and talked about that. And so really recognizing that, and then there may be an invitation there to change. Like, okay, is this really what I want to be doing and what I want to be remembering? Or if, heaven forbid, something were to happen, tomorrow or next week, what do I want to focus on? And so, in a way, I think it can be liberating,
Mhm.
even though I understand it can also feel very overwhelming. It's funny, even like the YOLO type movement. Do you remember that? The you only live once. I'm like, oh, there's some truth to that. Like the I don't know what generation came up with that hashtag, but like, again, I don't mean to justify people's, reckless behavior, but there is something to recognizing the fact that, our time here is limited, and how do you make the most of it? And what do you value? And how do you want to live out those values? And sometimes when people are in seminary, they have to plan their own funeral because they're going to have to then do funerals of other people. And it's an interesting task to think, okay, what are people going to say about you? And what would you want people to say about you? And kind of using that as a barometer. Okay, what is it that I am really hoping to be remembered for? And how might I do that today?
Yeah, live every day with the mindset of, if I died tomorrow, would I be satisfied
Hmm.
with how I've done, who I've been,
Mm-hmm.
the relationships. We get so uh we're really bad about putting things off, waiting until Monday, waiting until the first of the year, um waiting until XYZ so that we can have good relationships with our loved ones, and take the vacation or whatever. Or something as simple as I saw a meme the other day that was talking about how this person brought, or a friend brought them this fancy coffee or something. And she was like, "You're going to have to ration it out for special occasions." And he,
Mm.
no, no. And I myself used to be bad about that. I would get, like, the bath bomb, the fancy bath bombs for Christmas, and they would just sit in my cabinet, and I would use one every 6 to 8 months, only when I
Mm-hmm.
was really feeling down and out. But
Mm.
no, the just being alive
Yeah.
is a special occasion enough.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, because I feel like baths are one of my spiritual practices,
My too.
just my place to relax and to meditate and everything like that. But yeah, that concept, I don't know who said it, but I remember hearing someone say once, like, use the good china,
Yeah.
right? Like, don't, I mean, I don't have good china, but if I did, right? Don't save it for that special occasion. Today is really the special occasion. And yeah, I think that can be a really helpful mindset and a reminder.
Yeah, romanticizing your life with the fine china on just a regular
Mhm.
Tuesday
Mhm.
with your tacos. That's- coming back to the overwhelm and the liberation of it, both are true for sure. And the overwhelm of it, that, emotions, we feel them so, and it's what sets us apart from the rest of the animal
Mhm.
kingdom, right? Is our
Mhm.
ability to feel emotions on such a large scale, like such a range of emotions. And so large to the point that it literally does feel like we will explode from our heart
Mm.
in some of these cases, especially when speaking on like the death of a loved one. But the counterintuitive, like what makes it worse, though, and perpetuates it is our fighting of the feeling of those emotions.
Mhm.
Which,
Mhm.
is natural. We don't want it. We don't want it. We don't want it. So we push it back and push it back and try to run from it and try to hide from it. And that's exactly how it gets stuck with us forever. And then it's never processed. And then it causes problems elsewhere. But if you can have the intentional thought process to allow those emotions to come in and be felt, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's probably going to feel like it's tearing your heart open,
Mhm.
literally at the
Mhm.
seams. You're not going to survive this. But the thing is that you are going to survive it. It is just a feeling. It is a powerful feeling. And most often that feeling is the remnants of the depth of love that you had for the person. Or, like it could also be trauma and pain
Mhm.
related, and like, that shouldn't have happened to me. And yeah, I agree as well. But if you just allow yourself to feel these emotions and process them, they will process out, and then it'll be less and less every time. And then you can truly move on clean and clear of having to carry around that baggage.
Absolutely. I think one of the first steps, even if you're not going through your own hardship right now, but you're wanting to become a better listener, right? A lot of what I teach my chaplaincy students is first step is to recognize that you have emotions, right? I think, and sometimes this varies by generation. I think, today it's a little bit different. My kids are learning about feelings in school, but that wasn't the case for a lot of us. We didn't
Oh God.
have that emotional education to draw from. So even even naming emotions, I will ask my students oftentimes if they're are sharing about a case that they had. I'm like, okay, stop. What are you feeling? And they can't name a feeling, right?
Oh,
They'll say, well, I'm feeling like, or I'm feeling that I should have done da, da, da. I'm like, no, if you say I feel like, or I feel that, that's not a feeling. And so I even break it down for them so simply. I'm like, all right, we're going to go to, kindergarten level here just to name our feelings: mad, sad, glad, and frad, which is afraid, but we make it rhyme so that they can remember, right? So and the idea is that, so many feelings can really be distilled into that. So I'm feeling annoyed. Maybe you're not, that's mad, right? When you really distill it. And so recognizing our feelings is really significant for a couple of different ways. One, as you talked about, to help us process it, right? To even know what we're feeling. But another is sometimes our feelings are driving us, but we don't even know what we're feeling. And then it's impacting those around us,
yeah.
right? So if we were to go with mad, right? If I am feeling mad, but I don't know it, it's going to come out all over the place, right? And I don't intend to push people away, but I'm doing it. Or,
Mhm,
I'm being defensive in a meeting that I'm in and I have no idea.
mhm,
So I think self-awareness really starts with being able to articulate our feelings,
mhm,
and then work with them, right? And that can help you to be able to connect with the feelings of others, as I was talking about before. So if I am with a patient who is fearful of a surgery, right, I can tap into my own fear. Okay, like I know what it is to be scared of surgery. So I'm not going to tell them about my experience, which is a temptation for some people. They will do that when they're trying to be professional listeners. I'm going to say, tell me about the fear. What is it that you're afraid of?
Mhm.
Right? And allow that person that space to really talk about it. And they may say, I'm afraid that they're not going to do a good enough job and I'm going to have to do this again later. I'm afraid of the pain, or I'm afraid of, not making it off the table, whatever their fear happens to be, giving a space for that. And so that's how my feelings can help me, and knowing my feelings can help me to be there for other people. So even if you're not motivated enough to, do your own emotional, investigation for yourself, it can be a tool to help connect you to others.
Absolutely. And yeah, our emotions do drive our everything. The inner
Hmm.
workings and the outer habits and the external and the internal, like every single thing in our life is driven by our emotions. And most of us are running on default autopilot
Hmm.
and just letting them run rampant. And I was a full-blown adult before I realized that very few people have emotional regulation skills.
Hmm.
Most people are just letting them spill out all over the place, unchecked and untamed. I always use the analogy of a puppy and how our minds are like an untrained puppy until we work to train the puppy. And until we work to train it, it's going to be chewing everything up and peeing on things and just running rampant. And that's exactly how most of us live our lives. And then we're like, I don't understand why I can't change my habits to meet the goals in life that I want to meet and do the things and yada yada. And like, that's why, because how you live every single day, just moment to moment, habit to habit. You don't really want I don't really like the word habits because you don't want to, unless you're trying to create new habits, you really need to just, because most of us are on autopilot,
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
doing the same thing that we did yesterday by default. And instead, we need to be, it's all awareness. Everything is
Hmm.
awareness. All of the work on everything is awareness. If you want to create new habits, it's awareness. If you want to reach goals, it's awareness. Better relationships, with both yourself and others, processing grief, it's all, every bit of it.
Absolutely. And the ways that our feelings can intersect with our thoughts too is, that could be another whole podcast. But I used to be a cognitive behavioral therapist. And so the connection is really powerful. And like you said, that it's really about investigating it and being self-aware to know, what is driving me right now? Is it that, that puppy, or, sometimes we use the term like a lizard brain, right? Or is it, coming from a place where we are more aware? And what I always recommend to people, just from a mindfulness perspective, to be able to um, be present to the moment, to check in with yourself, to check in with, however you might define your own sense of spirituality or divinity or transcendent, to check in with others. Even those breaths and that regulation practices can really go a long way when you're in crisis, or when, you're just in traffic. And I don't know that we talk about those skills enough either. But like I said, I'm seeing a lot more of that, at least with our children and that generation.
Yes, the internet, with all of its flaws, has brought about a huge wave of information and knowledge sharing. And
Hmm.
now we're all aware of the thing. It goes, if you've never seen a pair of shoes in your life, then you had no idea that you don't know how to tie them.
Hmm.
And that's how most of us have been up until this point, is like we had no idea that emotional regulation was something that we needed to do. We've heard of anger management.
Hmm.
We've heard of
Hmm.
depression, but if you don't
Hmm.
particularly fall, anxiety, maybe even is sort of new. It's not, but we didn't have a name for it until now. We just were told to suck it up. Everybody's afraid of something. But now we know that there are things that we should be working on. And
Hmm.
we're seeing that, oh, the problem in my life that I can't seem to get past is actually, and you follow your emotions. You're like, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
that problem makes me feel like this.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And you kind
Mm-hmm.
of backtrack it until you can't anymore. And then you find out, oh, well, that bothers me because, or I do that and it bothers me because it's not who I want to be. And the reason I'm choosing to be this person is, well, falling into default of being the person who does this is because back when I was 7 years old, somebody who was supposed to encourage me about this one thing instead told me it was stupid. And then I internalized that. And well, now I realize that the reason that they said that was because of their own limitations for
Mm-hmm.
and somebody probably told them that instead of encouraging them, and then they just took it as face value truth because internet didn't exist, and there was before the internet we were pretty much subject to the people in our vicinity and whatever they thought and about how the world worked. So if you never question that, which a whole lot of people don't, they just take for whatever they're given for face value and never question a single thing, and then you can be like, oh well, I don't have to hold on to that anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and then you
Mm-hmm.
let it
But
go.
that takes so much work, right? And really kind of, when we think about family systems, like breaking the cycle
Mhm.
of the way in which you were raised or things got passed down, and in intergenerational trauma and the internalized messages that we have, whether from our family of origin or from, I see it a lot. People kind of internalize some of those spiritual truths that they've heard that are no longer serving them, and have a hard time parsing it out and letting go of it, and taking something new on, or changing out the tape of their own spiritual belief, because these things have really taken deep root within us. And so for that reason, I recommend, so we didn't talk about it, but part of what I do on the side, in addition to my hospital chaplaincy practice, is I work as a spiritual director.
Okay.
And I work with individuals who are looking to get more in touch with their sense of the holy, whatever that might be like. And a lot of that work is, looking at, okay, this is what I thought I believed about God. For those that believe in God, and now I don't know what to do with this or how to make sense of this, and really trying to listen in a really attentive way to what's going on in their life, and incorporating practices that may help, such as, meditation or contemplation, quiet and silence, which is also something that we're not great at as a society. So I encourage your listeners, if they're wrestling with any of this, there are supports, right? So spiritual direction is one that not a lot of people have heard of, but there's also, I'm a huge proponent of therapy as a former therapist, as someone who's still in therapy. But even something as simple as journaling, or, talking your thoughts aloud, I think can go a long way toward building that self-awareness. And that's also a coping tool,
Mhm.
right? So we talked about people that were caregiving for their loved ones before, getting in touch with what you are feeling can help you to cope and help you to care for yourself. It doesn't always feel like that, because sometimes it feels like hard work to do, but the results can be really significant.
Absolutely. I hear people all the time talk because I get, I'm really deep into personal development and people will be
Yeah,
like,
it sounds like it. You're talking the walk and walking the talk.
thank you. That's the goal, right?
Hmm.
And nobody want it never felt like work to me. And I hear people constantly telling me that it's work, and like it is work, but also you're just sitting around thinking about why things are and how things are and why things are and why you are the way you are and why other people are the way that they are.
Mm.
And obviously I was one of those kids who were constantly whying everybody. But they are coping mechanisms also. They
Hmm.
are coping skills. So, like, if you think you don't want to do the inner work to heal or process or get through this or that or change your habits, or if you think you're that type of person, but you're over here walking around like, I'm anxious all the time. Why am I so stressed out and
Hmm.
anxious? Does anybody have anything for anxiety? And you know, there's we're really quick to turn to medications. And
Mhm.
sometimes those are needed and helpful, and other times they're just a way to avoid.
Absolutely. And I think it can be for some, and it's been hard for me at various points in my life, but one of the reasons it can be hard is because it involves, visiting painful parts of our life potentially. And
Taking responsibility.
absolutely. And acknowledging hard truths about ourselves and, looking in that mirror and saying, oh, I don't really like that. But it is true about myself. And so, yeah, I mean, similar to what we're talking about with death, right? Like sometimes it's just easier to be in denial about some of these things than to face it, right? Or sometimes even as we're looking toward self-improvement, it can be easier to just say, no, I'm just going to focus on all of these other things, or I'm just going to try these medications or this. And I agree, it can be a great supportive tool. It's also not the only thing, and not certainly for everyone. And I think it is helpful to look at what are the roots of the problems rather than just treating the symptoms of it.
Mhm.
But again, it takes more time and it takes more intentionality.
It does, but you do get lasting results.
Hmm.
Whereas like medications and whatnot are just masking the issue. They're putting a blanket over it and hoping it goes away. But I mean, the blanket with the stuff, if there's a pile of crap in the middle of the floor and you just throw a blanket over it, you're still
Mm.
going to trip over it from time to time. Whereas if you do address things at the root and instead of throwing a blanket over it, you clean up the mess, then you have a spaced, free, and clear walk. It's the same thing with our emotions and all of the layers of gunk that's been piled on top of us. And I mean, sure, it's a lifelong process for sure. But I mean, we're all here until we die anyway, so might as well make the best of our moment.
Mhm. 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 Yeah.
All right. Well, we could do probably another couple of episodes, uh, spiritual stuff and more death talk. I love talking about it. Nobody ever wants to. I also am not very fun at dinner parties.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. But no, I do think it's important, and just as it's important to dabble in that joy, it's also important to remember how short life is, and use that to fuel the way that we live. So thank you so much for having me on here. And if individuals are interested in hearing more about death, I talk a lot about it. You can go to my website. I'm Christine V, as in Victor, Davies.com. And I also write a weekly newsletter that incorporates a lot of my stories as a hospital chaplain or as a spiritual director, where people are, really looking at grief or looking at resilience, or how to be better listeners. So I encourage people to check that out if they're interested.
Yeah. It's hard work, but the rewards are there and
Hmm.
worth it. And we're always looking for fulfillment, and that is a step in getting that, I believe. Are you familiar with Sasha Sagan? And
No,
she's Carl Sagan's daughter.
I was wondering about that. Okay.
Yeah, I recently read her book. It's for small creatures such as we. It's something like that. But it talks a lot about death because Carl Sagan, her father, died when she was about 15 or 16, and she took his death really hard. And the whole book is just about her processing it, pretty much. It's
I'm writing it down. I will add that to my TBR list.
Yeah, I highly recommend it for anybody who wants to start processing any of this. I cried
Mm,
like 5 times, but it was like
mm,
good heartfelt cry. It was like,
hmm.
oh my gosh, that's so beautiful type of cry. I'm gonna see if she wants to come on to the show and talk about it because
Oh, neat. Well, I can't wait to listen to that episode.
all right, well, thank you so much for being here. I guess we'll wrap things up.
Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed talking with you.